Please be seated.
Alderman, we think it's only Glenn Griffiths here rather than George.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome to this special meeting of Medway's Full Council, which is being live streamed via the Council's website. Before we start proceedings, I'd just like to welcome Richard Morsley from Chatham Historic Dockyard and representatives of the Chatham branch of the Royal Navy Association who are in the public gallery tonight, as well as Honorary Alderman Glenn Griffiths, Paul Harriet. I would also like to welcome some visitors from visiting councillors from the Maldives, accompanied by the High Commissioner and the Second Secretary from the Maldives High Commission. Good evening.
So, did you hear any of that? Yeah, you do. So, Madam Mayor, we think that volume may not work there.
Right.
Is that volume on? Would you mind? Do you mind if we do? Say, well, I understand you didn't quite get that. Do you mind?
I'm sorry. I understand that you couldn't hear me, so you can hear me now. Right. Shall I start again?
Yes.
Right. Well, good evening and welcome to the special meeting of Medway's Full Council, which is being live streamed via the council website. Before we start proceedings, I'd like to welcome Richard Morsley from the Chatham Historic Dockyard and representatives from the Chatham branch of the Royal Navy Association who are in the public gallery tonight, as well as Honorary Alderman Glenn Griffiths. I would also like to welcome some visitors from the Maldives, accompanied by the High Commissioner and the Second Secretary of the Maldives High Commission this evening. Right, item 1. May we have any apologies for absence? Councillor Kemp, have you any apologies?
Councillor Williams, Councillor Elizabeth Turpin, Councillor Rupert Turpin, Councillor Lamas, Councillor Opara, Councillor Filmer, Councillor Rodney Chambers and Councillor Diane Chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
Can I amend that? Councillor Opara is here.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Price, have you any apologies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I have apologies from Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or any other non-pecuniary interests from members of the council? Please clearly describe the nature of your interest if you declare one. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Aldous. I have a member of my family who is a member of one of the two organisations being discussed tonight. I don't believe it stops me from speaking and voting in tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members? No. Thank you. Conferment of honorary freedom of Chatham Historical Dockyard Trust and the branch of the Royal Navy Association in Chatham. Councillor Jarrett, would you like to make the proposal?
Madam Mayor,
Oh.
and I'm very pleased as Medway's Armed Forces champion, both a privilege and a pleasure to propose this motion, which recognises the enormous contribution made by the Royal Navy and Chatham Dockyard to the defence of this country over many centuries. This was particularly evident in many of our lifetimes by the challenge of Argentina's invasion of the Falkland Islands and its dependencies, which obliged Britain to get a large fleet ready for sea, send it to the opposite end of the globe, and then to fight and win a bitter and costly war for their freedom. In 1981, just 1 year before the Falklands War, the government had issued a defence white paper which announced the closure of the dockyard and the withdrawal of the Endurance, the ice patrol ship which patrolled the Antarctic waters, which was always serviced at Chatham and which the town and the dockyard had a very strong and affectionate link. Despite the start of running the dockyard down, it was called upon to send metalwork urgently to other dockyards doing the refitting, and it also provided stores to various ships in the task force. We were all very aware of the extensive work carried out in the nuclear submarine fleet, and one of which, I think HMS Conqueror, was famous for sinking the Argentine cruiser Belgrano. All these ships being dispatched to the other side of the world meant we urgently needed to bring into action the standby squadron so as not to leave the country open to Russian and other potential threats which are covered by Britain as one of NATO's staunchest allies. And despite knowing that their careers were slated to end in 1984, the dockyard workers put their hearts and souls into this essential work, just as they had done for centuries. And for that, I honour them greatly. As you will read in the agenda paper, on behalf of the people of Medway, the Council now wishes to cement and foster those close and long-standing bonds of friendship and mutual respect by granting the highest civic distinction that Medway can confer upon the Chatham Historic Dockyard, which keeps alive this proud record for future generations and is the most important part, perhaps, of Medway's heritage. We must also never forget the veterans based in Medway who served and some gave their lives in the Falklands conflict and also in other conflicts by also conferring the freedom on the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association, which is now, I understand, the biggest collective group of Royal Naval veterans and serving personnel that we have in Medway. Again, it is our hope that by doing this, we can register Medway's pride in its naval heritage and its sincere and lasting gratitude for the Navy's contribution to the life of Medway, which is our proud heritage. Accordingly, I move the recommendations which are contained in section 9 of the report to grant the honorary freedom of the borough on the Chatham Historic Dockyard Trust and the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association. I so move.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded, Councillor Jarrett?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me pleasure to do so as well, and to welcome our new friends from the Maldives, and to thank the Historic Dockyard and the Royal Naval Association. Madam Mayor, when we had the recent excellent Jubilee celebrations for Her Majesty, I missed part of those because I was in Argentina, and I immediately apologise to those who were at Armed Forces Day when a slip of the tongue I called Malvinas the Maldives. So our friends, new friends over there, rest assured, no task force is on its way to the Maldives that I'm aware of. So when I was in the airport in Buenos Aires, at the top of one of the escalators there was some displays about the Falklands, and although it was all in Spanish, it was quite obvious what it was about because it depicted images of a massive cemetery of obviously Argentine forces, and a number of pictures, poignant pictures of families grieving, and an artist's impression of the Belgrano sinking. And I thought to myself then about our brave servicemen that went to the other side of the world to defend the freedom that we take for granted. And I think that all those involved in the Falklands campaign, and indeed other campaigns that, to which we here in Medway contributed, deserve our highest praise, because no matter what we do for our communities and no matter how we serve, we don't put our life on the line for our people. And thank you for all you do and all you help to do. We owe you a debt that we can never repay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jarrett. I will now call on nominated members from both groups who each have up to 3 minutes to speak on the proposal. Councillor Maple.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor Aldous, and I welcome both Alderman Griffiths and also our friends from the Maldives here tonight. And it's also great to see representatives of the two organisations that we will be recognising. Mayor Aldous, nobody wants to see war or conflict. We've talked in this chamber in recent times about obviously what's happening in Ukraine, and we think back tonight to what happened 40 years ago, and those who served for our country and those that served for other countries, and all of whom will recognise the sad loss of life when it comes to conflict and war. And whatever people's individual views and political views about individual wars, and we may have lots of views about lots of those over the last 70 years, those women and men who served in our armed forces and continue to serve today do so without fear or favour, do so without necessarily personally having personal views, but putting their service first. And in tonight's recognition of both the place which was the heart of our community until in 1984 that heart was literally ripped out of the community and replaced with something remarkable, and I'll speak about that in a moment, but also the individuals, the women and men who served our country. And I know from speaking to members of the RNA who play an active role in our community. They were at the recent Chatham Carnival, which was a great success, and they played a key role in that. They served our country, whether in conflict or peacekeeping, with pride. And it is that same pride that we should all reflect back tonight as we support this proposal from the Deputy Leader unanimously, I hope, tonight. Since that 40 years has passed, we've seen two things. We've seen, I believe, a continuation of Medway's mutual respect for our armed forces, those who remain here in service and those who perhaps have no longer served but remain here as veterans, but also a recognition that from the ashes of the Chatham Naval Dockyard has raised a world-leading tourism and historic attraction, and we should be proud of that, and rightfully so. So on that basis tonight, Mayor Aldous, I'm very happy to support this. Members know in this chamber, I've said on many occasions, the Royal Navy is the reason I'm here, which some still may regret, but I'm proud to be here. I'm proud of all of those that served our country 40 years ago, and I'm proud to be supporting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maple. Councillor Brake, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand here this evening, privileged, I believe, to have the opportunity to speak on behalf of Medway Council and considering the consideration of confirming the honorary freedom of the Borough of the Chatham Historic Dockyard Trust and the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association, and in particular recognition of their members to the Falklands War in this, the 40th anniversary, which is commemorated this year. Against the backdrop of Chatham Dockyard being identified for closure as part of the cuts to the Royal Navy, the people of Medway were still stunned at the news when it became clear that before the keys were finally turned to shut the gates after more than 400 years of continuous service to the country, that Chatham Dockyard and its workforce would be called upon once more to support the Royal Navy and the ships so well known to Chatham. The winding down to closure stopped, and immediately the workforce, just as their forefathers had done so for over 4 centuries, contributed to part of the work required to refit and prepare ships ready for war. The ships that have passed through, or indeed out of Chatham, having been built on the shores of the Medway, is far too many to list. But one ship, of course, that remains famous has to be HMS Victory. Its keel laid and the ship built in Chatham is forever in our minds, for it was the ship that went on to be the flagship at the Battle of Trafalgar, where sadly Admiral Horatio Nelson should meet his end. Now I bring Nelson into my tribute, as I believe it is fitting to talk of the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association, as we recognise the contribution of so many of their members to the Falklands War. Today, the Royal Naval Association, or the RNA as it is fondly known, provides social activities and events, as well as welfare services to those who have served in the Royal Navy, its ex-members of the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, not forgetting, of course, the reserves and their dependents. The Chatham branch is but one of 270 branches across the country, and the Chatham branch is proud that it's 2 of its members who served in the Falkland War, and other members have served going far back as the Second World War. With core values cited as being unity, loyalty, patriotism and comradeship, it would surely come as no surprise that Medway Council wishes on behalf of its people to cement and foster the close and long-standing bonds of friendship and mutually respect with the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association. In short, Madam Mayor, confirming the honorary freedom of the borough on the Chatham Historic Dockyard and the Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association in recognition of their members to the Falklands War is a way on behalf of so many to say thank you for all that you have done. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brake. Councillor Johnson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Aldis. I'm proud to be able to contribute to this discussion. My family has experience of service in the armed forces, admittedly not the Navy and not the Falklands, and I know how important it is for us as a community to honour those who serve at great personal risk to themselves in circumstances of danger and great discomfort, and the impact of that service on their families. I know that those who have served are those least likely to glorify war or its impact. They are those who see what war can do and who often have to live with its consequences. It's particularly poignant in this commemorative year of 40 years since the Falklands War that we should stand with Chatham Royal Naval Association in solidarity, in commemoration and with pride, and we should absolutely recognise them with this honour from our community and their key role that the Royal Navy and those who have served in the senior service have played in Medway, but also in the history of our nation. And similarly for the dockyard, the working people of Medway also have a proud record of service to our nation. The dockyard has its roots in Tudor England, its roots in our island history. It's part of the fabric of our nation, those skilled workers and managers and technicians, those men and women whose lives were dedicated to the Navy and to the defence of our country. That active phase of their role has now passed, sadly, as so many skilled working roles have passed over recent decades, but we have the opportunity to recognise how that history is now brought alive for us and for future generations. A real strength of the historic dockyard is the way it succeeds in bringing alive our proud past and the individuals, the real people from Medway's past who lived and worked in the service of the dockyard. People such as Zandra Bradley, the first woman apprentice in the 1970s, Charles Dickens' father, a pay clerk, Fanny Austin, sister-in-law to Jane Austen, who sailed with her husband, captain of the Namur, or Hannah Snell, who disguised herself as a man and served in the Marines in India for 4.5 years. And the dockyard's now used for other events that bring alive our history, such as the recent one, the theatrical performance that explored the relationship between William Cuffey and Dickens himself. We must remember the past. It tells us who we are and why. I commend this report and its recommendation for approval by colleagues across the Chamber. Thank you, Mayor Aldis.
Thank to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a proud father of a daughter currently serving as a squadron leader in the RAF, the contribution of the military to the safety of our country today or in the past is important to me. I remember the Falklands War well. It was the first time in my lifetime I can remember we were at war. I had both friends and relatives who were around my age that were sent out to liberate the islands. Fortunately, my friends and family came home safely, unlike many who didn't. For all the soldiers, sailors, Air Force personnel fighting on the front line, there's always a team in the background enabling them to do this. Although Chatham Dockyard was starting to wind down, it still formed a cog in that fighting machine and made the liberation of the Falklands possible. And that's what we are here today to remember and honour. It's important to people to have like-minded friends and colleagues, and the RNA is one such organisation that provides that service. It keeps the rich heritage of the Naval Association with Chatham alive and well, whilst providing support for ex and current personnel and families. I therefore support the recommendation that the honorary freedom of the borough be bestowed on both Chatham Historic Dockyard Trust and Chatham branch of the Royal Naval Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hackwell. Councillor Prenter.
It's an honour to be able to speak at this special meeting today. I have my own personal story, as do many families in Medway. My father was born in Belfast and grew up wanting to see the world, and he decided the best way to achieve this would be to join the Royal Navy. For nearly 2 decades, he spent much of his career travelling across the globe or patrolling the North Sea against the Soviet submarine threat during the Cold War. That was until 1982, when it all changed, following the decision of the government of the day to not react to early intelligence that the Argentinian junta intended to invade the Falkland Islands. Unlike a similar situation in 1977, where conflict was avoided due to Operation Journeyman, the government in 1982 left itself with no choice but to order a task force to be sent south. Many service personnel and civilian dockyard workers were on leave preparing for the Easter holidays. There are stories of recalled submariners being woken by policemen, being tracked down by embassy staff while holidaying in Spain, all to return back to base immediately, leaving families behind not aware that their loved ones were going to war and sadly never to see them again. Civilian dockyard staff worked around the clock to ready ships with supplies, carry out urgent repairs, or hurriedly complete planned maintenance. Due to the hurried nature of the task force, time was of the essence, and some civilians had to leave on board the ships carrying out major repairs, which were normally done in bases and not usually at sea, down to the skill of our dockyard workers of the time. My father was serving on HMS Conqueror, which was refitted at Chatham, and the reason why Medway is my home. After being ordered to war, the Conqueror sailed ahead of the task force and patrolled for 90 days, patrolling almost at all times at deep sea. The General Belgrano was ordered to be sunk, and on the 2nd of May, the Belgrano was torpedoed with the loss of 323 Argentinian men. While leaving for safety and fear of attack from the escort ships, the Conqueror crew could hear explosions in the water, which some crew believed that they were being depth charged. However, this was the Belgrano's superstructure breaking up as it sank. One can only imagine the fear and uncertainty they felt. The Falklands conflict brings many images of success and patriotism, but we must never forget not only those who didn't return home, of which we have Medway residents, but also the images of burned soldiers and sailors and the scars we cannot see of PTSD. I visited the islands myself in 2012 as part of the concessionary scheme. Many service personnel and close family members of those that served during the conflict have travelled to the islands. Many suffering from PTSD find this experience a great benefit for their mental health. Please support this initiative to carry on while we go through this challenging economic times. Giving the freedom of Medway to the Historic Dockyard and the Chatham Royal Naval Association isn't for me a jingoistic celebration of war, but a recognition to those who didn't get a choice but acted professionally, left their families at short notice, and those who didn't return. both service personnel and the forgotten civilians who worked in the yards and who, after having their civilian ship requisitioned, volunteered to stay on board these in the conflict zone. So please support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Prenter. Back to Councillor Doe. Would you like to respond and conclude the debate?
I'll be very brief and simply say that I would like to thank the members that have supported this. I'm sure that many of them, it was obviously not possible for us all to speak, but I think we all spoke with one voice. And I think that voice is really the voice which I hope future generations will hear, in the sense that I hope that they realise the wonderful tradition to which we are the humble heirs. And I think that every time that they know about the freedom, any time that they go for a tourist attraction at the dockyard and so on, I think they must really try to bring to life the fact, as the dockyards exhibits do, what it is like to see war at sea. It is not. We've heard tonight from Councillor Prenter that what that feeling is like, and we can only, for those that have not served, I think we can only imagine both the fear and the sheer horror of it all. Nevertheless, I still think that we have a very proud tradition here. The people not frightened to face the odds, not frightened to face the future, as indeed the Medway towns did not give up when the dockyard shut. It merely carved out for itself a new future. But that doesn't alter the fact that it was the spirit of the dockyard that also helped to get the spirit of recovery going after the dockyard closed. And therefore, I think it's that spirit which makes me very proud to be here in Medway, and I'm sure I speak for the whole council in making that assumption. And that assumption, of course, also goes to our Royal Naval Association, and in particular, of course, we have the Royal Naval Memorial, which will always remind us of the sacrifices that have been made time and time again, without question. So, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for all that's happened, and I hope that you will see that Medway will always be a place where servicemen are welcomed. It will always be a place where we remember our heritage, and it will always be the place where which stands, I think, second to none as a result of that heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doe. Do members agree the recommendation as set out in paragraph 9.1 of the report on page 9 of the agenda? Thank you very much. I conclude this part of the meeting. Thank you.